sudden, he realized why he was there, kind of like Paul. There were some guys there, and he just started talking to them. And they had troubles, and they had things mixed up about what God had done in their life or hadn't done. And he witnessed to them because he's an evangelical. He witnessed to him, and he helped them. And there was one African-American man he knew, and he also prayed with him. And all of a sudden, he realized, that he was there for a reason. They were processing and booking those guys in, and he had not been. They wouldn't let him even make a phone call because he needed to get the car from the courthouse out of there, and he needed his wife to call someone for a bondsman. Well, they wouldn't let him do nothing. They made him wait till the last. Well, he looked down the hall, and here came a man walking, and he peeked out of there, and he knew him, Bill Bondsman. Bill Bondsman. And he says the name to him, and he comes up and goes, "Doc, what are you doing in here?" So I explained the situation, and this Bill Bondsman went and laid down whatever they had to do to secure him, but they had to wait till he got processed before they could take him out. So it was late in the night when he got there, and he got something inside of him burning about the unjust judge. He got that burning. It started to consume him. His false pride consumed him in such a way, he had thoughts in his mind of what he could do. He wanted to go get even with that judge. And he wasn't holding himself back, and he was bitter. Totally bitter. It just consumed him. In the meantime, Harvest Springs Community College, our community church, was starting to split. Too many people with good ideas as to who had the right ideas that caused dissension, broke down the body, divided against itself, and it fell. Because we're the church. God doesn't fail us as a church, we are. When we fail that call, that's what happens if we get enough people doing it. You can polarize a church. So, he's telling us this story. I'm thinking, man, this is the weirdest cat visit I ever had in my life. Marine was saying that. He goes on to say that finally they got him out, but he still burned inside with anger, and he wanted to get even. He still had that consuming him. Forgiveness, forget it. He wasn't going to do none of it. So he goes to work and he collapses on the floor like a heart attack. So Dr. Smith pulls him up, puts him on the bed where they deal with the animals, and did CPR, and they got him back together, sent him in an ambulance on the way. They thought, well, he must have got his electrolytes out of balance. And so they were fixing that, and by gosh, he kept having episodes. One of them, they were wheeling him in, and Father Wayne got up in the middle of him and sat on his chest and gave him last rites. As they rolled him in. Told him this is the big one. He's having all this stuff going, and in the meantime, he's praying to God. God, what am I going to do with this? And he would feel whacked hard. He felt it. And then later he'd say, I'm so angry, God, how can you make this just a whack? He felt it on his face, and this went on several times. He says, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And God said to him, now you know that evangelicals can get a little far on, just so you know that. Anyway, I love him, because I'd never have this story nor the end of my sermon, which I asked permission for, by the way. He used his name, and he said, sure. So he finally said to God, God, you're slapping me. Yeah. And it hurts. Yeah. And then he realized he had let it go, that he was not forgiving another person. And he was operating in brothers and sisters. Then he goes on to tell him he had to do a few things. He had to get involved in a 12-step group and get his ducks in a row. And he cried. He cried. Do you know, there was one God in that situation. And we were far away from where he does his practice. But there was one God, and we knew who was present. Didn't matter what denomination we came from. So I decided, he's going to ask me what church I pastor. So I started this way. I said, well, you know, one of the things I have done with ministry is when people are crossing over, I've been called to do that. And I said I had an African-American man who was dying from AIDS died at our house. And Rena and I took care of him. Rick did vigil. We did vigils for Daryl. We'd play cards, and so he'd have that. You know when you lay down and you're kind of hearing stuff in the background, it makes it comfortable instead of just playing quiet, so you don't think you're hearing a radio station on the airways. You know, and so he cried. He said, I had evil in my heart. That I was allowing those 7 deadly sins to be used by Satan for him. That's what he said. And he cried. Then he told about, you know, remission, and I told about redemption. And by now it's 1 o'clock. We have been in seeing the vet from 11:40, now it's 1 o'clock. Holy, can you believe it? We're having church right there with the cat. So he says, you know, let's pray before we go. How you always have a vet that pray with you? I mean, is this kind of out? Could this be divine by God? Could it be something way out there that happens in a regular place? Yeah. So we held hands. Did he take a firm hold of your hand? Yeah, he did mine too. And we held hands, and he prayed. And you know what he said? God, I want to thank you for the cat that brought us together this morning. This little scruffy cat brought the 3 of us together, and we knew when we were one with God. That's the jewel I'm giving you today. Because if we learn, we know we're in the presence of greatness. We know we're in the presence of Christ. We know because we sense it and we become one and miracles happen. That's the clue. The clue of stretching our holiness is so that God is manifested within this body and we know who is the author. And we know that Christ is present here. And we know that they're not going to get all wigged out if we do some things different. But what a miracle. What a miracle. I left there and Ray goes, are you okay? Are you tired? And I said, no, I'm just trying to process this. I'm like, wow. So to my brother at Harvest Springs Community Church, he changed just a bit at the word of AIDS, but he prayed as if we were one in God. Wow. Wow. Will you pray with me now? God, I thank you for the many gifts that you have given in this congregation. I thank you for the creative ministry that we can have and where we're heading. I just ask that you would anoint each one of us, that as we're here right now, you would place inside of us, you know, some strength to step forward, some strength to step up to bat. We know, God, we have a community that's dying. We know that meth has taken our youngsters right and left. Make us your teachers. Sort out the teachers in this congregation and put some coal behind their behind that will motivate them to be ready for new members. And all God's people said, Amen. Amen.